Hello to a new episode of Reptile TV. My intro pets here are a pair of frilled lizards, subadult animals. I specifically took two because you can really see the differences. You can recognize the differences between males and females. The male has the characteristic frill, while the female only has a very slight hint of the crest on her back. That crest up there and almost no crest on the back. They're quite shy. You have to take your time with them. They do become tame, but they're great terrarium pets and their size is still quite manageable. So in a 1.20 to 1.50 meter terrarium, you can keep a pair quite well. They do become tame, but they're great terrarium pets and their size is still quite manageable. So in a 1.20 to 150 meter terrarium, you can keep a pair really well. Really pretty terrarium animals, wild caught, of course. In the past, some of them were caught in the wild and they are extremely shy. If the snouts run into each other, well, if you look, I can even let them go here. They don't always run away straight away. Really a great terrarium animal, and that's why it's my intro pet for you today. Our topic today is the Borneo Earless Monitor, scientifically known as Lanthanotus borneensis, which is a very rare lizard from Borneo. It's also a bit of a success story in terraristics. For years it was considered almost extinct. People thought that in the wild they were practically gone. And actually it was only through terraristics or through terrarium keepers who went to Borneo and looked for them. Do they really not exist? Or do you find any? And indeed, they found them there. Exported animals, and they are now being kept in terraristics. I would say they are bred fairly well, but still not like a bearded dragon which can reproduce in the hundreds of thousands, but they are being bred in terraristics. Really an exciting topic. I don't have an animal here to show you myself normally. Always have something in my hands. But a few years ago we were already in Japan, in Aizu, near Shizuoka, Japan. We filmed how the Shiraba looks. That's why we will use these images from Aizu. Thanks again to Shiraba for allowing us to use these. These Earless monitors are quite a quirky, medium-sized lizard. They can grow to about 40 centimeters with the tail. Just half of that is the tail, which means the body length is about 25 centimeters. What's interesting is which genus they belong to, or to which family. The name Earless monitor is actually incorrect. We now know that they don't belong to the monitor lizards. They are still called that, but in English it's Earless monitor. But it is definitely not a monitor lizard. For a while people thought maybe they belonged to the Gila monsters, the North and Central American Gila monsters, Heloderma, which have a somewhat similar appearance. Their physical structure could fit into that family, but they probably don't belong there either. DNA testing has revealed this, that they are quite close to snakes, that they are a kind of snake with legs. But to classify them as snakes would probably be a stretch. Herpetologists and scientists are still trying to figure out where the Earless monitors belong. Until about 10 years ago, they were hardly represented in terraristics. No, well, there is one. Every few decades, an animal would show up somewhere at an animal exporter, and that was basically it. About years ago, terrarium enthusiasts set out for Borneo, and I said these animals, which include various species of amphibians and small aquatic creatures, must be there. They found them, so they live very hidden in small streams. These streams are often surrounded by dense vegetation and rocky terrains. Almost underground flowing streams seem to never see sunlight or daylight, but are completely hidden due to the thick canopy and natural barriers that obscure them from view. That's why they weren't really noticed by the population in Borneo. No one knew that these lizards occurred in larger numbers in Borneo. When they were found there, animals were exported worldwide for the terrarium trade or into the terrarium trade. Back then they were not under any species protection, no Washington species protection, but then in 2021 they were included in the Washington species protection, recorded since then WA2, an export quota of 0. That means Borneo no longer issues export papers for the Lanthanotus. So the animals that are currently in the terrarium trade will probably be the breeding stock that we can and must breed. And that's actually a good thing. Those that still exist in nature, they should stay there. And we have them in the terrarium trade for breeding. And we hope that in the coming years and decades, many offspring will be bred. Other generations will be bred. Now let's talk about keeping them in terraristics, similar to what I just mentioned. Very hidden, a lot or almost only in the water. We also need to provide that in terraristics. I would suggest 1.20 meters terrarium with 2/3 being water. 15 to 20 centimeters high. It's not like with young crocodiles where they still have to stand. It might be a bit higher. If you have the opportunity, you can create a kind of slope, which is interesting to observe because some reptiles like to stand on the ground with their hind legs. Some don't care. They are more or less free swimming in the water. You can try it out and see what your experience is. You don't keep the animals particularly warm, so around 20 or mid-20s degrees, 25 degrees. Maybe I would also set the water temperature at a maximum of 25 degrees, somewhere between 23 and 25. It's important, just like with crocodiles, that you pay attention to this. The water shouldn't be warmer than the land. That's completely unnatural. I think it harms any terrarium animal if the water is always the same temperature. It should be cooler than the land, as it is in nature, and you've never seen that in terraristics. If the water is cooler than the land, as it is in nature, and you've never seen that in terraristics, that the animals would be in the manner of sunning themselves from that. I believe that UV lighting is completely unnecessary, and that the animals don't want it at all. I haven't heard of anyone offering UV light to the animals. Rather, they need warmth. You might even be able to work with heat panels if you make the terrarium 50 centimeter high. I haven't heard of anyone offering UV light to the animals, rather they need warmth. You might even be able to work with heat panels if you make the terrarium 50 centimeter high. Work with heat panels on top so that I have an air temperature of about 25 degrees and maybe add a tube for lighting. Then you have a great monitor lizard terrarium with plenty of hiding spots and moss to offer. In nature, they also hide under the moss or under leaves or plants. That would definitely provide for them as well. That they can protect themselves as a final point. This is of course an aquaterrarium, but don't forget that you also provide dry areas in the terrarium so the animals have the opportunity to find a completely dry spot and not be permanently in the damp, because that can risk skin fungi. So also provide dry areas for that. The animal has the option to go to a dry area, and when it eventually lays eggs, it obviously doesn't want to lay them in the water, but it should also have the option to lay the eggs in a dry spot. The animals are basically omnivores, the earthworms and dewworms being the main predators. The favorite food and has proven to be the animals I've seen so far while feeding and eating. I remember the Japanese ones. They go absolutely crazy for the worms, especially the lazy ones that just lie around. You think of a slow, lethargic, phlegmatic lizard, but as soon as earthworms come into play, they really go for it, and it gets interesting. They've already fed them fish pieces. I could imagine snails they're eating, they already seem to accept food, where earthworms are the favorite food. If you're a proud owner of such animals, I would definitely recommend supplementing with minerals, especially if they don't have UV light. It's important that we add minerals. Otherwise, the males are incompatible with each other. Doesn't make sense, like with almost all terrarium animals. That's why it's better to keep a few together. Or one male with 2 to 3 females seems to work as well, in case you should become a proud owner and possibly even you have several females I think as a pair it's the least ideal, and they seem to breed and lay eggs between 2 and 15 eggs. The literature indeed says make for an exciting and fascinating terrarium animal as pets and intriguing creatures, which in nature probably has less and less living space, and that's why for terraristics the chance of being able to keep the animals in terraristics. In the end, a reference to good literature here in Reptilia issue number 123. That's a bit older, February 2017, okay, already 6 years old. At least there's an article about the breeding of the Borneo tree monitor, which Michael Solveig and Robert Sipe did a great report on how they keep and breed the blue monitors for sure. Exciting. Take a look at that. Otherwise, feel free to give a thumbs up if you found it interesting. These Lanthanotus are certainly a terrarium animal, which is called Lanthanotus. Not Lanthanotus, Lanthanotus for sure. Not a terrarium animal that you can find on every corner and that every second one of us will have at home, but I still think it's a great quirky terrarium animal. But I still think it's a great quirky terrarium animal. That's why I wanted to introduce it to you today. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and feel free to post below what you think of the animals. Have you seen them in person before? Or at home, which ones do you have? Unfortunately, you can't post any photos. Otherwise, you could have posted some nice photos. Stay loyal to me and check out the Earless monitors.